Good morning and welcome to this morning's reflection. And how are you this morning? I hope that you're well. So come on in and take a seat. And let's just spend some time together this morning looking at the work of Catherine Marshall. Catherine Marshall became a fairly prominent writer after the death of her husband, Peter Marshall. And Peter Marshall was a Presbyterian minister who became the chaplain of the United States Senate. And she wrote a memoir about him called A Man Called Peter, which became a bestseller. And so today I wanted to look at some of her work around fasting, but not in this case fasting from food, but fasting from criticalness. And I'm going to read as she writes. The Lord continues to deal with me about my critical spirit, convicting me that I have been wrong to judge any person or situation. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way ye judge others, will you be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Matthew 7, 1-2. One morning last week, he gave me an assignment. For one day, I was to go on a fast from criticism. I was not to criticize anything or anybody. Into my mind crowded all the usual objections. But then what happens to value judgments? You yourself, Lord, spoke of righteous judgment. How could society operate without standards and without limits? All such resistance was brushed aside. And I could hear God saying, just obey me without questioning, an absolute fast on any critical statements for this day. As I pondered this assignment, I realized there was an even humorous side to this kind of fast. What did the Lord want to show me? So for the first half of the day, I simply felt a void, almost as if I had been wiped out as a person. This was especially true at lunch with my husband Len, my mother, my son Jeff, and my secretary Jean Ann. Several topics came up: school prayer, abortion, etc., about which I had definite opinions. I listened to others and kept silent. Barbed comments were on the tip of my tongue about certain world leaders, but I suppressed them. In our talkative family, no one seemed to notice. Bemused, I noticed that my comments were not missed. The federal government, the judicial system, the institutional church could apparently get along absolutely fine without my penetrating observations. But still, I didn't see what this fast on criticism was accomplishing until the mid-afternoon. For several years I had been praying for one talented young man whose life had become sidetracked. Perhaps my prayers for him had been too negative. That afternoon, a specific, positive vision for his life was dropped into my mind with God's unmistakable hallmark on it: joy. Ideas began to flow in a way I had not experienced in years. Now it was apparent what the Lord wanted me to see. My critical nature had not corrected a single one of these multitudinous things I found fault with. What it had done was to stifle my own creativity in prayer, in relationships, perhaps even in writing, ideas that he wanted to give to me. Last Sunday night in a Bible study group, I told of my day's experiment. The response was startling. Many admitted that criticalness was a chief problem in their offices, in their marriages, or with their teenage children. My own character flaw here is not going to be corrected overnight, but in thinking this problem through, I've found the most solid scriptural basis possible for dealing with it. The Greek word translated judge in King James becomes criticize in Moffat. All through the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus sets himself squarely against our seeing other people and life situations through negative lenses. What he is showing me so far can be summed up in the following. A critical spirit focuses us on ourselves and makes us unhappy, and we lose perspective and humour. A critical spirit blocks the positive creative thoughts God longs to give us. A critical spirit can prevent relationships between individuals and produces a criticalness in retaliation. Criticalness blocks the work of the Spirit of God, love, goodwill, and mercy. Whenever we see something genuinely wrong in another person's behavior, rather than criticize them directly, or far worse, gripe about them behind their backs, we should ask the Spirit to do the correction needed. Convicted of the true destructiveness of a critical mindset, on my knees I am repeating this prayer. Lord, I repent of the sin of judgment. I am deeply sorry for having committed so gross an offence against you and against myself so continually. I claim your promise of forgiveness, and I seek a new beginning. So what does Richard Foster have to say? He says that the central idea in fasting is the voluntary denial of an otherwise normal function for the sake of intense spiritual activity. Now, when we understand fasting from this perspective, we see its reasonableness as well as its broader dimensions. The Catherine Marshall reading helps us to see these broader dimensions by teaching us about a way of fasting that is not from food, but from a critical spirit. Then, as she chronicles her day, we see the intense spiritual activity she enters, especially as it relates to the young man for whom she was praying. One of the first things we learn in experiencing fasting is how it reveals what controls us. You see, we cover up with food and other good things what is inside of us. But in experience of fasting, these come to the surface. Did you notice how true this was in Catherine Marshall's experiment? She learned how dependent she was on criticism even to feel like a whole person, and how utterly bankrupt her critical insights were at creating positive change in anyone or anything. She saw what was controlling her, and this released her to begin moving in a new direction, a direction that was free of a critical spirit. And the same will be true for you, just as it is for me. And so as you meditate on these words, may you have a blessed day today.